Alrighty, welcome again to another episode of the Super Radio Show. It is 8:04 here at WXAC 91.3 FM, coming to you live from beautiful downtown Reading, Pennsylvania, where we are neither beautiful nor downtown. And we have a very special guest coming up on today's show. I am here with Cameron Liu, aka Ginger Root. Let's see if I did this right. Hello. Oh dear, I don't know if the people can hear you at home. Ha! You know what I say, strictly professional here on the Super Radio Show. I'm going to wrench my phone case off and try this again. All right, let's try this a third time, because third time is the charm.
Testing.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
Okay. I did hear you through that, so we've got this together now. Now let me pull up the questions, because professionalism and all that. All right.
Sure.
Okay, to my listeners at home, I can hear him. Can you hear him? Because I have my girlfriend, my mother, and several of my best friends from back home listening right now. Just because this is like the first real event episode I've ever had going on.
That's more than when I was doing radio in college. That's way more than I got on my show. So congratulations.
That's more than I usually get. Normally it's just my girlfriend and my mom.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, so that's actually a really good segue for what I want to start with. Is okay. We can definitely hear you. So hell yeah, I did something right. Woo.
Awesome.
So anyway, that's a good way to segue to what I want to start with, because one of the things I concentrate on this show is connections in music. So I was wondering, where did your musical career begin? Like, who or what made you pick up an instrument?
Yeah, I mean, I was given a guitar for Christmas when I was 10 from my parents, not because I asked for one, but because they were like, "Oh, you're playing too much like Super Mario Saga or whatever." And so they gave me one. It came with a DVD. It was like how to play the blues in a G chord, and that's what I started out with. And I liked it, and they put me in lessons. And then in high school, there was an after-school program that was basically, I just described like the movie School of Rock. It was like, hey, we're going to do like a Beatles cover show. Go home and learn like Paul McCartney's bass part, and just show up Monday and figure it out. So it was really cool, because there I think I really discovered that I liked playing music. I liked writing music. I started to save up for like recording equipment and instruments and stuff. And there I just kind of learned the fundamentals all through just a bunch of trial and error. Like, it wasn't hand holding. It was literally like School of Rock. Like, all right, show up to the bar, plug your guitar in. If you sound good, great. If you don't, then that's on you, buddy. So yeah, that's kind of where I got my start in music. And then from there, I like would back my friends up with their bands, or I would back up like local singer-songwriters. For a long time, I did awful like cover bands and wedding gig bands, the whole shtick. And then I had a couple bands before Ginger Root, but there came a time where I wanted to try to write something different than I was writing at the time. I think it was like freshman year of college. So I started writing stuff, and I used the name Ginger Root. I released it on Bandcamp, and then that's kind of how Ginger Root started. It was just kind of like an exercise, like a breath of fresh air from like trying to not write the way I used to write music. And yeah, so that's how I started. In terms of like who made me want to pick up the guitar, I think it was probably like the Beatles. I mean, just classic answer, but huge McCartney fan and everything. So.
Huh. Interesting. That was actually one of the later questions I was going to ask. I was wondering if the kind of music you do with Ginger Root is the kind of music you listen to normally, or is there, or is this like completely outside of your usual style? And was that the kind of music you said that wasn't the kind of music you were doing before that? What kind of music were you doing before that?
Yeah, I was doing definitely like power pop stuff in high school, like Electro Light Orchestra or XTC. Or like Sugar Plastic stuff, and like definitely more like guitar-based music. And I wanted to write something completely different, so I wanted to try to do like keyboard, like more beat or groove-oriented music as a return. But I think, from the first record that I put out as Ginger till now, I think now is more a combination of literally like everything under the sun that I listen to. I finally feel like the iteration of Ginger Root now is kind of like a good representation of stuff that I listen to or stuff that I have listened to over the years, like since middle school, high school, college, all that stuff put together, I think kind of makes up what Ginger Root, makes Ginger Root.
Huh. Interesting, because I was going to ask about that, is because I noticed there like seemed to be like two distinct phases to it, or that's what I thought. I noticed like a very soul phase and a very city pop phase to it. So that's interesting that you say it is just everything amalgamated together, because I can still hear the soul side with stuff like Mahjong Room, Riki, and even in City Slicker. So that's interesting that you say it's all of that stuff combined. Where did you come up with the name Aggressive Elevator Soul from? Like, how did you come up with that name?
I think it was one of these really awful like local bar opening shows. We played a set and some guy came up, probably really drunk or something. I don't remember at all. It was really dark. It was really loud. And he was like, yeah, your music's like, I feel like I'm in an elevator because it's like really chill, but it's like really loud at times too, and you really go for it. So it's really aggressive. But then, you kind of got like a soulful thing going on, like keep doing it. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like slowly put together those words together. And I was like, oh, like aggressive elevator soul, I guess. And he was like, yeah, like that, whatever that is. And I was like, I'm going to run with that.
That's really fun. I love that story. And on the topic of being a band, where did you get to know your current bandmates? Like, how did you all meet up, decide, one, that you like playing music together, and how did you get them to say, hey, you want to come with me to do this new thing I'm doing instead of what you guys were doing before?
Yeah, so the drummer Matt, I met both of them in high school in that program. They're a little younger than so I was like a senior when they were like sophomores or something like that. And Matt, my drummer, we've done all those gigs together that I mentioned, like the other band, backing up like local singer-songwriters, as well as like the cover band, wedding band. So we've played together for quite a long time. So we kind of stuck together because he was really the only drummer that I felt like I really clicked with, and he was just like a really cool person and stuff. And we had our old bass player, he was actually like a blues guitarist, and he just played in a ton of different bands, and he was like a really good friend of mine at the time. And but then kind of life happened and things kind of separated, so we were looking for a new bass player, and one of Matt's friends is a killer guitar player and bass player. Like, he plays bass in a couple bands, he played guitar in a couple bands, and he wasn't doing anything. The band that he was in another time where he was playing like rhythm guitar, like kind of disbanded, and he was just like kind of a hired gun. And Matt was like, hey, Ginger Root's looking for a bass player if you want to like come and try out the parts and stuff. And and so Dylan came in and totally brought us to the next level, which was really fun. And it's just the three of us who play live, so like on the recordings, I write and I perform everything on the record, but they're really the people that help me bring it, to the stage, to in front of real people, which is a big part of it as well. So yeah, we all met in high school. Through the touring and gigs and stuff, we've become really good friends, and untradeable experiences for sure.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's. I'm really happy you mentioned how you do all of your own recording, because I was going to ask about that. How long did it take you to pick up all those different instruments, and like, how is that different from playing live?
Yeah, I mean, so to start, like I said, I started on guitar. In the program, there was too many guitar players. Like, every high school kid was playing guitar, So the teacher told the lead teacher was like, hey, do you mind trying bass out? And I was like, yeah, sure, which is like a subtle way of saying, hey, you're not a great guitar player, but maybe you could play bass. But ended up like really liking it. I think it is my favorite instrument, and I think I deem myself first a bass player more than anything. It's definitely the thing that I take the most time with when writing parts for, when I'm writing stuff for Ginger Root. But yeah, and then in the same program, I kind of just literally like would fill in on drums for people who didn't show up to rehearsal. So I kind of learned that way just by getting thrown under the bus. And then it wasn't until I wanted to write keyboard songs that I started keyboards. So that's really like the newest thing. So I guess if you're putting like a tag on anything, maybe over the course of 5 or 6 years to pick up those instruments. But in terms of how it differs live, it's, that's definitely a hard thing to convey, being the sole person in the studio making all the music and playing all the instruments, how to like, give it and hand it off to, some of my best friends, and hopefully they can bring it to life. Because, I'm not the best drummer. I drum because I have to have a drum part. I'm not the best keyboard player, but I have to have a keyboard part, so I try to do that. But it's definitely a fun challenge. There's only 6 hands, there's only the 3 of us when we play live, so it's like, how do we translate the song from this one type of sound to another? And it's just an ongoing learning process. A lot of trial and error. A lot of stuff works, a lot of stuff doesn't work. But it is definitely a very interesting challenge, a very fun challenge to have to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it interesting that you were forced to pick up the bass in that way, and you say Paul McCartney is one of your big idols, because that's basically how he ended up picking up the bass.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it was when Stuart Sutcliffe quit. It was John basically forced him to. So that's an interesting bit of synergy there. This is one of the questions that came from my friend Isaiah, who is the one, like I said, got me into your music. He just showed it to me in the car one day. I was like, wow, this really fits in my radio show. And then like 2 weeks later, I see you on the CD rack. So that was a nice surprise.
Oh, that's great timing.
Mm-hmm. So his question was, if there was any instrument you could pick up right now, like another skill, which would it be? And also, so I guess it's 2 questions. Also, if you could own any instrument, get one right now that you're thinking about getting, which would it be?
Yeah, I think I'd love to play some type of woodwind or brass instrument. Over the pandemic, I bought like a really cheap euphonium, because I heard like it's fairly easy to play, but it's not as big as a tuba. So I tried that for a while. I still have it. I want to pick it back up. I got my embouchure kind of okay. Like was able to make sounds. But yeah, any type of like brass instrument, because I feel like that's just a totally different world than anything like guitar or bass or like traditional like rock and roll instruments. It's a definitely different animal. And then if I were to like just so happen to acquire an instrument I've been eyeballing, I think I want to try to get my hands on like the new Moog Grandmother or something, some type of synth like that. I've been using the same synth for a while. It's been my workhorse, but I want to try to maybe expand my synth collection a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So that raises an interesting question. Was that you on the saxophone solo in Loretta then, if you do all your own production?
It was, but it's very cleverly edited MIDI.
Ah.
Yes, so shout out to Logic's new expressive feature with woodwind instruments. You can actually go in and say how much breath you want, or if you want it to quaver, or if you want it to slide down. And so I played the solo like just on a keyboard, and then I went through and I like chose what note would sound like what expression, and then just like compressed the hell out of it and added delay and stuff. And so it is me, but it's not real.
Huh. You certainly fooled me in the music video. I'm gonna be real. Yeah, that's interesting. I barely knew what you were saying there, because I may be on the radio, but I'm actually an education major. So it's really cool seeing people who actually know their stuff with music talking like that. I tried to be a musician in 4th grade, just never practiced. But
no worries.
Anyway, so a lot of this show, like I said, is about like inspirations and connections. So I remember seeing you say that Philly soul is one of your big inspirations for music, and you said that's not the music you grew up on. So like, do you remember how you got into them? Like, who or what got you into them? Either a person who you enjoyed listening to their music, or who showed you that music?
Yeah, I think it was a matter of like when I was introduced to the world of like collecting records. Actually going to the store and buying tangible vinyl records. I would just go through the dollar bin because I had $5 to my name or whatever, and I would just go through and I would find all these like obviously a lot of them were not very good, but you get a lot of gems, and that's how I was introduced to, like, I think the first Philly Soul band, or I'm pretty sure they're Philly Soul or Stax or whatever, is, I always get the acronym wrong, but it's like MSFB or MFSB or something like that. They're mainly an instrumental, like, horn band from the 70s, and the stuff there definitely, also goes in with, like, the city pop I was listening to and everything, and a lot of those genres kind of, give and take from one another, which I think is why it was so interesting. But I know growing up, I would hear, Motown a little bit, growing up, and definitely in the program I was in high school, we would also talk about, the Wrecking Crew and all that type of, in those veins of music, and I think they all definitely interconnect.
Yes, very much so. So I heard you say you were into city pop before then. Now I'm wondering how you got into them, because I've learned the hard way you can't find those in the thrift store record bins, because God knows I've tried.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I found out about, like, city pop stuff, I think halfway through high school. I think that's, like, literally when, like, Plastic Love was being thrown into everyone's recommended. But then also I remember distinctly watching the Soul Train performance of YMO's Firecracker on YouTube. That got recommended to me. That was I think that was really the first wind of Japanese music I caught. And I don't know what this is, but I like it. And the funny thing, I never even thought about this, but my statistics teacher, I think literally a couple months before I discovered that video, was like, he was a crazy guy. He was a cool, absolute nut of a person. Like, he looked like a bird's nest, and he looked like he only ate granola. I failed his class, but he was nice enough to, like, pass me so I'd go to college. But he was like, "Hey, you're a music guy." And I was like, yeah. He was like, "You should check out Kraftwerk. It's like a crazy German electronic band. They were the first people to do electronic music in Germany." I was like, "Okay." And at that time, I was like, "I don't know what this is. This is pretty cool. It's a little too out there for me." It grew on me, and then a couple months later, YMO popped up, and Kraftwerk is, like, a big influence on YMO. And so if I heard Kraftwerk before I heard YMO, I don't know if I would be as, like, head over heels for it, because it was groove music, but, like, the same palette as Kraftwerk. And at the time, I was, like, just getting into Kraftwerk, and I never thought about it till right now. But I think that's how I kind of found my way into city pop, because the trio that it made up Yellow Magic Orchestra kind of touched every city pop record. It was like all their own same friend group helping produce all those records from late 70s all the way throughout the 80s too. And I think that's kind of how I stumbled upon that strange world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that, because that's the whole crux of this show, is to show just how much of a mark Sono Takahashi and Sakamoto had on the pop music world in general. So
absolutely,
the fact that they touched you as well, phrasing, but really just proves my point, I guess. And I guess that answers my next question too, is how do you feel about YMO personally? Like, now, are they still one of your big influences, or have you moved on to other city pop artists?
No, I think they're always gonna have a place on the shelf in terms of influences. I think also too, just the lore that comes with the band. They don't have a whole lot of albums out. It's not like listen to their records all day long. There's only a handful. And I think there'll always be an influence. There's so much, even though there's not a lot of material, there's a lot of, like, meat on the bones to kind of look at and dissect and stuff. And then, you listen to, Hosonis's, like, solo records and all that type of stuff, which are killer as well. And then you start to going, okay, what did he produce? The Tiako Nuki record he produced, and the whole YMO gig is playing guitar on, like, that Pacific record. You just kind of slowly go into and make a deep dive. But they will probably always stay an influence for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me. I saw, speaking of city pop gods and goddesses, I saw Maria Takeuchi recognize your music relatively recently. How did that feel?
That was pretty wild, because I think for a lot of people that was like for lack of a better phrase, like my first city pop crush. Like, it was one of the first city pop songs I heard. Mm-hmm. And she has a huge body of work. And there are definitely some deep cuts that really shine in her discography that I'm still trying to dig through, and when that came through, it was like kind of like a senior high school dream. I was like, oh my god, like I just remember listening to the song over and over again, and then finding about her records, and then it was really like the gateway drug into the city pop genre, tied with YMO. I think YMO and then Maria Takeuchi are like on two sides of the city pop spectrum, and then you start to just discover everything in between. So yeah, it was very crazy too, because over the pandemic I've been trying to learn Japanese, and so I tried to catch the interview, and I didn't catch that one, but they replayed a different thing about like them spinning Loretta or whatever, and I was able to like kind of get the gist of what they were talking about, and that was like a totally crazy experience. That was like, wow, I don't know what's going on. This is amazing, but I like understand it. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that is one of my favorite parts of learning languages. I want to be like decalingual, but I'm only up to bi right now.
Up to five? What 5 are you at?
I said bilingual.
I was at 5. I was like, wow, polyglot. That's cool.
I wish. I might have studied 5. I only know English and Spanish. But
Got it.
Was that your first made it moment, or can you think of another moment where you realize like, ooh, this project is really something?
Wow, that's a really good question, because I think every album kind of had that shining moment for me. I think like the very first record I put out, it didn't do anything, but I think we played like a house, like a backyard show at college, and like all these people from my classes were there, but I was such an introvert that I never really talked to any of them. So I came on stage and I played, and afterwards they were like, I didn't even know you talked. I know that was like a shining moment, because that was like right when I started, and people were like, hey, your music's like tolerable, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like this is all that I hoped for. People want to listen to it. That's great. And then when I put out Mahjong Room, I think it was when the band Krungbin from Houston, Texas, which I'm actually wearing their shirt right now, was like, hey, crazy offer, do you want to go tour with us in Europe? And that was like our first big tour that we've ever done. We did like DIY record stores up the Bay Area and stuff, and that was, I think, the first time where I was like, I didn't believe that someone like that with such a following like that and such a like a curated taste in music would want to bring or give someone like me a shot. So that was really cool. Definitely the Maria Takeuchi thing was up there. And then I think for Ricky with that album, that one was actually really hard, because since it was in the pandemic, it was like right at the time where no one really, I felt like no one wanted to listen to music, and so it really, I kind of got my hopes up, and no one really listened to that record. And now people are, because of thankfully for City Slicker, but I know at the time I think that was kind of like a loss. I felt like I really went through or whatever, because I put 2.5 years of work into that record, and not a lot of people listened to it, which I kind of felt bad about. But then it had its also shining moments too, of being like the music videos went really well, and I was really proud of it. And at the end of the day, like as long as I'm cool with what I made, then that's really all that matters. And that's kind of what I learned from that record, is like, you're not going to be successful every time, and as long as you enjoy what you made, you had fun, and you believed in it, then I think that is what was most important.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree there. That's a very fitting place to end off on, because I noticed like a definite shift in your styles when the messaging of it got more personal. Like I feel like the city pop side definitely comes out more when you start singing about yourself, and especially like memories, because I know that's a big part of both Riki and Mahjong Room. Is that a conscious decision, or do you think there's just something about that kind of music that brings that out?
I don't know. I think a part of it too is like, I think the last thing I think of myself as a lyricist, your words are always last for me, and so I think like it's just so, I feel like over the years I've just kind of figured out that I can't write like stories about other people, or like like I find like my strong suit, and I feel most comfortable and it feels most natural if I talk about like, did I like remembering things a certain way, or how I feel about certain things that have happened before, or things I'm scared about in the future. I think Mahjong Room was a lot about the past. Riki was a lot about the future. And I think, City Slicker in a way was kind of like an experiment of like, well, let's try to like write about someone else, but obviously it's coming from a personal place, but it's like the City Slicker. He's not me, it's some fictional character, but it's still something I created, and so it's somewhat personal, somewhat alien in a way. But yeah, I think like in terms of like, does that genre of music, evoke certain types of feelings or whatever, it just might be how that music is just, it's retro already, so it's already nostalgic. So nostalgic music combined with just me already feeling comfortable writing nostalgic, topics and nostalgic themes probably just, I guess, go hand in hand. I never really thought about it.
Huh. Well, that was what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to come up with a very original question for that. So I'm glad to know I've succeeded. So
Yeah.
I noticed with going back a little bit to something you talked about before, your college days. I noticed you recorded toaster music in your car. May the toaster rest in peace.
Yes.
As a way to keep busy during breaks between classes. What made you decide that was how you wanted to spend your time between classes?
Yeah, I think because I felt like, well, one, I wanted to just like, I was always like trying to write music or try to make covers or just like anything music based, but there wasn't anywhere on campus where I could do that privately, not get disturbed or make a lot of noise for a long period of time. Like I wasn't a music student, I went to school for film, so everyone's editing or whatever, and it just so happened that like I commuted to school, and by the time I got home and then like got back into the car and then drove to traffic, I would have like wasted that whole break. So I was like, well, I have my car, which no one will disturb me in there, and it's somewhat roomy, and I have small instruments, and at that time too, I kind of was trying to maybe work on myself in terms of like being okay, like just like having free time alone. I think I had a friend group at the time where I had kind of like a falling out with, so I was like just trying to figure out how to pass the time without doing homework, because I just hated that. I wanted, what else could I do? And yeah, so the first Toaster music track is an original, and at first I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a song a week for the whole semester, and I was like, I can't do that. So then I was like, oh, I'll do covers and I'll just arrange it myself, because I feel like that's like half the battle of writing music is like the material and the score and the notes, but then also like how do you what textures and what instruments do you lay on, and I wanted to really just practice that. So I think covers was a great medium, and yeah, basically I didn't want to do homework. I was a terrible student. I didn't want to talk to anyone, and I had my car. So all those together, and Toaster music happened for 2 semesters. Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, it sounds like a perfect combination. Was that before or after you did Spotlight People? That was after.
That was after, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you did say you made somewhat of a name for yourself doing that. Did anyone find out that you were doing that, and like that was you in that toaster of yours recording those those songs being posted on Bandcamp, or were you just doing that completely anonymously, except for that cop who showed up that one time?
Yeah, man, that cop. Yeah, no, I think I was just kind of doing it, and slowly some of my friends would be like, hey, what'd you do, like, did you go grab dinner during the thing or whatever? And I was like, oh no, I do this thing every Monday. And they're like, oh cool. So it really only existed in my friend group. But Toaster music actually is the one thing that got me with the label I'm with right now.
Wow.
My best friend in kindergarten found me on Facebook and was like, oh, I'm doing music, like you're doing music too. And I was like, yeah. So he reshared something. This is when back people would use Facebook, or whatever. And it actually wasn't that long ago. I'm making myself seem like I'm 40 years old. But his friend was a student at Belmont in University in Nashville, and he was trying to make his own label. It was just him and his roommate in a dorm, was like, hey, we want to just try to help artists. We're just starting out, and we don't have a lot of connections, but we'd love to just work with you. I was like, absolutely. And I'm still with them today because slowly but surely we kind of grew together. We would he would get an opportunity and I would take it, and then I would get him an opportunity because of how I did it or whatever. And yeah, so Acrophase Records, which is the label I'm on right now, I was given the opportunity because I just did Toaster music every week, and then one of those videos, my friend reposted, it caught wind, it was totally just great timing. but they just started out. Literally, they were just like, yeah, we're just like two dudes in a dorm room, and let's just kind of help each other out. And I was like, absolutely. I have no one else. You know, the Orange County music scene makes such different music than the music I was making, so I really didn't have like a musical friend group. And they helped me, I helped them, and then now we're still together. And honestly, it just kind of worked out. So if anything came from Toaster Music, it was that.
Oh wow, that is pretty incredible. That's another great segue actually, because I wanted to ask about like the kind of connections you've made with doing this, and that's a good example of that. And I was wondering, because I was really jealous when I saw this, because they're my favorite band. How were you able to meet Caro Caro Bonito? Or well, 2/3 of them.
Jamie was at home with a family emergency, but what was crazy is, so when I was recording Ricky, I was just shooting emails into the dark, like Hail Mary emails, like I don't know if they're going to spawn, but you might as well give all you can got. And one of them I was like, I would really want Caro Caro Bonito to sing on the opening track of Ricky, and that would just be, just to collaborate with them would be a dream come true, or whatever. Or just literally to get a response saying no would be a dream come true as well. The record came out, and a lot of time passed, but then finally he tweeted he didn't tweet at me, but he posted my music video for Weather, and he was like, this dude sent me an email, or he was like, he didn't post the music video. He was like, I'm looking for a guy. He is kind of city pop influenced, and he sent me an email, but I can't remember his name. I can't find the email, and he's on a TV show in the music video, and then his followers were like, oh, you mean Ginger Root? And he got in contact with me, and he was like, hey, I'm sorry we couldn't work things out, but let's keep in touch. I really enjoy your stuff. And just that alone, I was like, this is incredible. Yes, please, let's keep in touch or whatever. Literally a year goes by because of the pandemic, and he emails me totally last minute. It's like, hey, we're playing a streetwear convention in Long Beach, and I think you live close to there. If you are free tomorrow, come on by, and we'll get you into the convention. And I was like, absolutely. So I canceled every plan I had that day. I went, I met them, and I thought that I was just gonna watch them play, but they literally yeah, come to the green room and let's hang out, and let's walk around the complex together. And I felt so I was like, this is really weird because I'm a huge fan. And Sarah walked into the room and was like, oh, we're such big fans of you. And I was like, this is really weird. I never thought this would happen. Yeah, we just hung out that whole day, and we talked music, we talked touring, we talked about what it means to be an artist, which was super reassuring and super uplifting, because I think that was the first time I talked to someone that got it. They're doing it. They're ahead of me in my career, but they went through what I've done, and I'm kind of lost because I feel like I don't know a lot of I have all these unanswered questions about upscaling as an artist. This is not a normal thing to go through, and so they're really cool. And yeah, and that's kind of how it is. And then we kind of follow each other still and keep in touch once in a while. But crazy story.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan.
Yeah. I'm super jealous of that, I have to say. So, is there any collaboration possibly brewing? Anything you can say on here?
In terms of collaboration, one that is out that I did, that I'll re-announce is I remixed a song for Krungbin, which was a lot of fun. That was my first remix ever, really cool. So I did that. I'm working. It's actually more that I'm procrastinating because I haven't had time. But I'm trying to work with a Japanese artist called Yi. She's it's funny. I found her music when I was in college, and I kind of was listening. And all of a sudden, she was like, "Hey, would you ever want to collab?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan." So there's that coming up. I would love someone like Caro Caro Bonito to remix maybe a new song or something. I know I've been keeping in touch. Just because the city pop community is so strong, Night Tempo, who's an artist in Korea who flips city pop songs. We've been talking together, maybe trying to do something. There's nothing in the works. Oh, I want to also plug, because a lot of people, I just didn't see it, but I made a Beatles cover with one of my favorite rock bands, White Denim.
Oh wow!
So that came out. A lot of people don't know about it just because it's hard to for people to listen to things. But that came out as well, and I want to give a shout out to James. He's definitely not listening to this, but I want to say thank you to James for collaborating with me on that. That was a lot of fun. They're like my favorite like rock band ever, and yeah. So that's, I think, nothing official, but definitely just talking to people is really cool. Like talking to people that I've listened to for so long is really cool. Yeah, crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm. So that gets me to another question. Who haven't you had the chance to meet or even possibly collab with that you would absolutely love to?
Yes. It's funny because it's like I'm so close, but like we haven't crossed paths yet. Is Japanese Breakfast. I would love to really just sit down and like just pick her brain about creativity, because she's a big influence on me in terms of like creative drive. She has 3 albums. She wrote a book, like a memoir. She directs all her music videos. She's going to direct a movie. She made a soundtrack for a new game on Xbox and stuff. And like that is, I just admire her drive and her passion, and that's someone I would really love to sit down. Collaborate would be great, but really just talk to. The funny thing is, we have the same booking agency, so we have not the same agent, but the same network of people. And it was funny because I emailed my booking agent and I was like, hey, she's playing in San Luis Obispo. I was going to take the train up, I don't know if it's not cool for me to ask, but could I get like a free ticket? And they're like, yeah, no problem. And I was like, I'm so close to meeting her. Like we're in the same friend circle, but I've never communicated with her. That is one that would definitely be on my list.
It's funny you mentioned her directing stuff, because I was wondering what that was like for you, because I saw you directed, I know, at least some of the City Slicker music videos. Was that, and I know you were a film student, was that your first time in the director's chair? Because I see you call yourself editor by day. Have you managed to direct anything before?
Yeah, I think every Ginger Root music video I've managed to direct and edit, which has been super fun to do. In school, I wanted to be a director, but it was just so competitive. Just like how everyone was playing guitar in high school, no one wanted to play bass. Just like everyone wanted to be a director, no one wanted to edit. So I went into editing, and that's honestly how I freelanced as an editor. I still freelance here and there when I have time, but that's like what I did, out of college, in college and out of college. And then I was like, well, I feel like the only way to practice directing is like to practice directing my own stuff, and no one's going to be like, hey kid out of film school, let's direct a big Paramount movie picture film, whatever. So I was like, I'm just going to do my own thing. It's for my own music, so there's really no harm, no foul, and if it doesn't go well, then oh well. If it goes great, then great, And so I think City Slicker, though, was the first time I wanted to try to make the whole, like all the songs and all the music videos feel like they're in the same universe. I think that was kind of the first thing. It was definitely, at times, felt like it was I bit off more than I can chew. But all in all, it was a great experience. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I'd love to keep directing the Ginger Root stuff. I've directed a couple music videos for other artists in the past, but it's just honestly like, making music videos takes like 5 years off my life, so I've already decreased my time, my lifespan by like 20 years or something. So I try not to do it as much for other people, but when I can, if it works out, then I definitely would like to try to do that more as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's, I know I say this is a good segue a lot. It's like that's how conversation works or something, but that's making me wonder, what is in the future for Ginger Root in general? Like more music videos, more next albums. Like what do we get beyond the Japanese cover of Loretta?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I feel like I know that I'm always working on new music. They're all from different points in the what am I listening to spectrum or whatever, and so I don't know what the next. I have ideas of what I want the next, collection of songs to kind of sound like and kind of be about. But it's tough too, because honestly, like, because of how well City Slicker went, I thought about this last night. I was like, oh, maybe I just try to make City Slicker too, but I feel like a lot of people do that. They try to just make their sophomore record, or I mean, this is not my sophomore record, but their sophomore effort from the lightning in the bottle type of moment or whatever, the same thing twice, and that really never works. And so I feel like for a long time I was struggling, like, okay, how do I make, the sequel to City Slicker? But then I looked about how different like every record was, how different Spotlight People was to Mahjong Room, how different Mahjong Room was to Ricky, how different Ricky was to City Slicker. And I think personally that's what keeps Ginger Root interesting, is not necessarily how can I reinvent myself, but kind of like similarly in a way, like I look up to like Tori Moi and how every record, it's still him, you could still hear him in the music, but it's like he made like, a house record almost. Then he made just like a soft rock record, and then he made like his first chill wave record, but it's still Chaz, it's still him, but it's like a different outfit every time. And I think that's what I want to do, is like, I think whatever I want to go with, whatever, when I start writing the music and I start fleshing out the demos, whatever comes to me, whether it is city pop again, whether it is I go back to like Philly soul stuff, or if it's something different, maybe I start making guitar music again, I don't know. But I do know that new music is always on the way. We have a tour coming up in the springtime. That's like the thing that's on the docket, sure. But yeah, honestly, like just now starting to get back in when wearing my songwriting hat and wearing my production, music production hat has been a lot of fun to just play with. And so, yeah, I think that's, I know that I want to do another EP. I think it's a happy medium between people who just like to listen to one song over and over again and people who want like a huge record. I know EPs kind of get a bad rap, but I think, for the music landscape is now, and for me and for the music listener, I think it's a happy compromise. So new EP, always definitely in the works.
I'm very much looking forward to that. And on the topic of tours, this is a little a personal question for me. Is there any chance that could be an East Coast tour? Because as someone who has never made it further than Pennsylvania, I would very much appreciate an East Coast tour.
It's funny, as we're trying to plan an East Coast tour. We're actually, so there's no promises, but we are trying to come out to the East Coast in January. But it's so hard to plan things because everyone's touring again, and like every venue is like booked up with everyone and their mom trying to play shows again, And so I do know that we have one show in New York, like that's the closest thing we have to like confirmed in January, and we're trying to build something around that. If not, then we're gonna try to do something probably in the early summer, just because unfortunately, like the opening tour we're on in the fall, they have so many radius clauses, and for people for listening who don't know, radius clauses are like, if I play a show in LA, or I have a show in LA, I can't play another show in LA within like a certain time period or whatever. So because that's such a big tour, but it doesn't include the East Coast, we're actually trying to plan an East Coast tour because it's the only thing we can plan to do. So no plans right now, no official plans right now, but we are having the ball roll for maybe something in January, and if not January, something in the summertime.
Can't wait for whenever it is. So that opening tour, are you allowed to reveal who it is? Is it the same band you have on your shirt, or is it?
No. Yeah, we announced the tour a month ago, so it is public knowledge. We are touring, opening for the hip, crazy popular indie band Hippocampus. So it'll be a lot of fun. They invited us on the tour. It'll be the biggest rooms we've played, so we're really nervous about that. Matt, our drummer, is still a student in college, so we're trying to figure out his school schedule around also being gone for a month. It's like he's like going to graduate this spring, and I'm like, but he's like, I want to play a nationwide tour, but I also want to graduate college. I'm like, we're trying to figure out how you could do both, man. I'm like working on it, but yeah, so we'll be touring with Hippocampus. We're basically going everywhere except the East Coast, which again is why we're trying to plan our own East Coast tour. But yeah, that is basically the whole month of April.
Intriguing. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that. One question I wanted to ask before, when you're talking about your songwriting process, I was going to ask if there are any genres you wanted to explore as Ginger Root, but you said that it's pretty much a exploration of all of the genres you're listening to. So is there any like a certain vibe, a certain memory you would want to explore through the lens of Ginger Root? And also, do you go into your songwriting process with like that in mind, even when you get to writing lyrics, or is it just whatever happens?
Yeah, I think it's, it depends on the song. Sometimes I think what happens normally is I come in just being like, I'm going to poke around on the keyboard, I'm going to hit the drums, something's going to come out eventually. And then once I get kind of a lot of voice memos or really awful demos, I'll go in and I'll be like, okay, these groups of songs sound nice together, and it kind of reminds me of this. And I think maybe if I write 2 more songs like this, like consciously, I'm going to try to like complement these songs. That's like kind of when more of the intent comes in. But usually during the songwriting process, it's all kind of happening at once where, I'm thinking about, a music video, or thinking about, this would be really good as a middle track, or this is a single. I definitely think that those thoughts happen throughout the whole songwriting and mixing and mastering process. I think in terms of like specific things, I know that I'd love to maybe be a little more personal on records, as personal as Mahjong Room was, where, it talked about kind of like thoughts I had about how I grew up, or even, I know a big part of it too is like sharing, growing up Asian American. That comes across a lot in Mahjong Room, and especially with Ricky, and even in City Slicker, even though it's primarily like Japanese influence, there's a lot of, notes of like Hong Kong, which is where my family was from and stuff. And so I think that will always be a theme of Gingerroot, is kind of like that, Asian American upbringing. Those stories, those feelings will always be a huge theme in the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is definitely something I noticed, and I was wondering if City Slicker was inspired by any specific films you had seen growing up as a kid, like an influence of something your parents, grandparents, or extended family, or someone in your community had shown you.
Yeah, I think like it was like it half inspired Ricky, and then it also half inspired City Slicker, but like literally any Jackie Chan movie from like the 80s or 90s, like that's a big influence. I did martial arts, growing up, and like, he was a big idol of mine. He's such like a precious gem, a national treasure of a person. And so, yeah, like I think that type of stuff definitely influenced City Slicker, like all those like, late 70s films, aesthetic wise, from Hong Kong, but also stuff like, like Shaft from, I think that was like a late 70s movie too, definitely influenced, City Slicker in a way. And then, also like a bunch of like, retro anime I was watching at a time also went into a big kind of aesthetic influence into City Slicker as well.
All right, I think we are unfortunately coming up to the end of our hour, so I would like to ask you, especially now with another album under your belt. I see you'd answered a similar question already, but this was before City Slicker came out. Which song have you done which you say are you like 100% the most proud of?
Man, that's a good question. Geez, I have a couple, all for different reasons, but I think one of them, I'll go really quick, but I'll have one from each record. From Spotlight People, it was I Might Just, because I felt like that was the most like not experimental, but the way I recorded that I felt like was a really cool undertaking. From Mahjong Room, I think it was Mahjong Room. It was the title track. I was very proud of that song and how it came together. For Ricky, I think it's Listen Up is maybe my favorite, because I had that song forever. I was almost going to throw it away. I wanted it so bad to be a song on the record that I ended up hating the song. But because then I finished it and I was like, this is one of the most favorite things I've ever written, I feel like. And then from City Slicker, I think Juvan is maybe my favorite thing I've written off that one, because it was the same thing where I had like one section of the song I really liked and I could not finish it, and I was almost going to throw it away. And thankfully I like kind of bit through it and chewed things over, kind of tried different things, and it became what it is today, and I'm really proud of that. So I think those are one from each song. I couldn't pick just one, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's understandable. I hear a lot of musicians describe that as choosing a favorite child almost.
Yeah.
So since I noticed it wasn't on the list, how do you feel about Loretta being your arguably most known song? Would you rather it have been one of those on the list?
No, I think to be honest, I get why, Loretta kind of ran its course the way it ran its course. I think after writing it and looking at it, I was like, out of all the songs, it kind of makes sense. I feel like it was kind of, I think, a perfect storm of, I had a couple songs that kind of sounded like Loretta, or I think Loretta was like a way I wrote it in a way that was similar to like Weather or Before or Call It Home, where it was one of those songs that I literally just wrote it in like 30 minutes, and then I was like, that's cool, and then I was like, all right, well, I'll record it tomorrow, and I recorded it and it sounded good, and I was like, all right, and then what do I want to sing about? I was like, oh, I'll just sing about someone called Loretta. It's the City Slickers' Lost Love or something. Let's just have fun with it, like ham it up, like let's add a sax solo, for crying out loud. I think it was just kind of spur of the moment, and I think people really feel that on track, and I guess that's why it kind of went the way it went.
Huh. Alrighty, so unfortunately this is coming to the... That's a very interesting way of putting that, because I had never thought of it that way, that like it was actually a personal thing from him, because I know like City Slicker is supposed to be something along the lines of like a heist movie, so I always assumed like he was doing that as a cover, like being on TV like that in the music video, but I never thought it might have been like a personal thing like that, so that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, we are coming to our end of our hour, and I am so thankful to have you on. Not only have one of my new favorite musicians on my show, but as my first interview ever. So
well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming. Is there any way you would like to promote yourself? Like I think we've made it pretty well known that you are in fact Ginger Root, but if there's any like platforms you would like people to consume your media through, your Instagram, whatever you'd want to shout out.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Chris, for having me. My name's Cameron Liu. I make music under the name Ginger Root. I have a bunch of stuff, obviously, on Spotify and Apple Music. Any streaming platform you listen to, stuff is probably on there. I do make, some things related to Ginger also on YouTube and TikTok. So if you're on those platforms, there's a lot of extra stuff you could kind of dive into there as well. But honestly, and then I think the last thing I'll plug is City Slickers finally coming to vinyl. So everyone that collects records have been bugging me when it's going to happen. Pre-order ends next week, so you could find the link on all my socials to that, and that's the only thing I'll actually like unshamefully plug.
I think I have to get in on that, actually. As a record collector, I just realized I haven't done that, and it's a really cool looking release, so I kind of want that. I wish I had a VHS player for the City Slicker VHS too.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. We made a couple more of those, so if anyone's interested, the whole EP is available to watch as a VHS tape. It's got behind the scenes, it's got karaoke versions of the songs and stuff. Even if you don't have a VHS player, this is like my elevator pitch, it comes with a QR code and a bit.ly link that you can type in and stream the whole VHS if you don't have a player as well.
Well, you sold it to me, because my VHS player eats tapes, so now I know I can enjoy it.
There you go.
Alrighty, thank you again so much for being on my show.
Yeah.
But don't go anywhere, because here at WXAC 91.3 FM, we're going to hear from Ginger Root and more on the Super Radio Show.